Okay. So, like I said, this is a really basic article page. The entire body is wrapped inside a div with the ID wrapper. Inside of wrapper, it's broken out into 3 different parts. We have the head up here. We have a div with the ID content down here, and then we have a footer down here. The header, like, we have a nav for it with the UL tag and the LI tag, so that really kind of typical navigation that we do a lot with the UL tag and the LI. And the div with the ID content, inside of here we have an H1 tag, we have an H2 tag. The H1 has the title, the H2 tag has the date, and past that we have a div with the ID featured image. That's going to be our image, which is there on the left, and then we just have a whole bunch of paragraphs. In the footer, we basically just have a copyright and a little message there. So this is not what I expect your website to look like, or even like how the HTML needs to be built out. You can use whatever HTML is necessary to actually build out your website. But this is just a very typical format where we have a menu, we have a content area, we have a footer, and in the content area we have a title, we have a date, we have a photo, and we have some text. So these 4 parts are probably going to be a part of every single article which is on your website in different format, but it has like these 4 parts of content here. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to use PHP to separate out the 3 main parts of this HTML. We have a header, we have a content area, and we have a footer. So we're going to use some PHP so that we can have the header information in one file, the footer information in another file, and the content area information in a third file. The reason why we're going to do this is because, the header doesn't really change. The header is going to have the same menu for all of our articles. The footer is not going to change. The footer is going to be the same for all of our articles. Now, the part in the middle, well, we could have 3 different HTML files which would represent each article, and that's the way we're going to start. But we're eventually going to get to the point where we actually only have one article page, and then the data for these 4 parts can be separated out. But first, let's actually get this to the point where we have just 3 separate files, one for the header, one for the article, and then one for the footer. So when we take a look at this, this is our normal HTML. This is everything that you guys kind of know from the past couple of semesters when it comes to just normal HTML. We have the head, we have the body, IDs, different tags, and things like that. So if we take a look at this, in our file structure, oops, and this is going to be the same that you downloaded. We have article1.html, we have a style CSS, and we have a folder for some images here. So, in order to start doing some PHP, we have to actually use PHP files instead of HTML files. So, where we have this article1.html, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by duplicating this into 2 more files. So I'm going to copy and paste, and copy and paste. So now I have 3 versions of this exact same file. I'm going to name one of them header.php. So I'm changing that extension that was at the end from HTML to .php. So I'm going to name one of them header.php. I'm going to name one of them footer.php. And this last one, that's article1.html, I'm going to keep article1, but I'm going to change the extension to .php. Now, I just duplicated this file, so all the look of all three of them, when I actually open them up, should be the exact same thing. Come on. Okay. So we have our header PHP, we have our footer PHP, and we have our article 1 PHP. You can see the different tabs that I have up here for header, footer, and article 1, but they all look exactly the same. So let's start off by just simply deleting what we don't need out of each of these files. So for our header, we want all of this. We want the doc type, we want the HTML, we want the head, we want the body, we want the wrapper part. We want everything down until we get to this content area. So this is where our content actually starts. This is where the different articles will actually be different from article 1, 2, 3, and 4, or 2 and 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out everything that actually has to do with our article. I'm even going to keep this part where we have div ID content. I'm going to take out everything else below that.
Starting from H1?
Yes. So this is our header PHP, and the last line that it includes is this div with the ID content. This is our header PHP. This is the very last line that it includes. Next, let's go to our footer.
But you have that div tag with content?
Yes. Because it's just what's inside of it that's actually going to be different. We want this to exist on we want everything here to exist on all of our article pages. We're going to have 3 different articles by the end of this. And this part here that I've highlighted, which is the only thing in our header.php, this part is going to remain the same on all 3 article pages.
So you kept the content, but it's really everything.
What about the closing HTML?
So we're going to get to that next.
Okay, but I
So-
should delete it for now.
Yes, so for your header PHP, you're going to delete everything below the div with the ID content. So there shouldn't be anything
So
else.
even the footer and the body and all that.
Yep.
Everything below what?
Everything below the div with the ID content, you're going to delete everything there for header.php. Okay. So next, let's go to the footer. Again, footer right now includes everything. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at where this div with the ID content actually ends. So if you're using brackets, if you click inside of that, just like this one where we have header and nav, it's going to highlight like the beginning or the end of those tags. I'm going to go ahead and click within this div with the ID content. If I scroll down, this is where that div ends. So for the footer.php, I'm going to delete everything above this div. I'm going to include this ending div, but I'm going to delete everything above this ending div. So right now this exists on line 38 for me. So starting with this paragraph and everything above it, I'm going to delete everything there. So now footer.php begins with an ending div. And then we have the footer tag in here, we have the ending div. This is the ending div from the wrapper, and this is the ending body tag, the ending HTML tag. You know what, let's actually put in some comments. I'm going to put in a comment here. We'll say end of div content. These comments, of course, don't actually do anything, but it does kind of help to see what's going on. End of div hash wrapper. Okay. So, if we're just looking if we're only looking at our header PHP and our footer PHP, here on the right now, this is our footer PHP. Here on the left, this is our header.php. So it's everything except for the article. The header includes everything up until that point with the content, and the footer includes everything after the actual content ends, including that ending div for this part here. So for our article1.php, for right now, let's go ahead and just get rid of everything that is in the header and footer. So that means that this is our article1.php. I'm going to get rid of everything down to where it has div ID content.
How do you get tabs open in brackets?
Oh, under view and... Oh, that's right. Sorry. I have an extension. I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing here. What's the name of that extension I use? I have a couple of extensions on here. It's something with tabs in it. I don't know why this is taking so long. It is called brackets file tabs. If you want tabs that are up here, I like the horizontal tabs up here. But yeah, if you go to find an extension called brackets file tabs, it's just like add-ons for your browser. You can do that same thing, but it's the same kind of thing if we have it over here. I just kind of like it up there better.
Once you download the extension,
yeah, if you go into File and Extensions Manager.
Yeah, download the extension, but how do you
Should can I take a look at it a little bit later?
Yeah.
I decide. Okay. So this is our article1.php, and I first got rid of everything that was in the header.php. So including the div with the ID content, I got rid of everything above where it has the H1 for article 1. If I scroll to the bottom of our article 1, again, I'm going to get rid of everything that's in the footer. So that includes this ending div, which ends off the div with the ID footer. I'm going to save that. So our header.php, includes everything down to this point. Our article 1 starts it at that point and then goes all the way down to our last paragraph. And our footer picks it up from there, and we have the ending div for content, and we have the footer, and we have the ending div for wrapper, and we have the ending body and HTML tags.
So is there a reason you took the div tags out of the article 1?
So this part here, this div with the ID content, I want that to be the same on all of our article pages. Again, what we're eventually going to get to, the point where we're going to have 3 different article pages. But the only thing that's actually changing within those article pages is what actually is in the H1, what actually we have for the date, what actually we have for the featured image, and the paragraph content here. So even the wrapper, if I want the wrapper to remain the same for all of these articles with the div, the ID content, then I want to make sure that stays in the header and the end of that stays in the footer. The reason is if I'm using this div with the ID content in my CSS, if I'm which I'm actually not even sure if I am. No. I am, but it's not actually doing anything. But if I were to reference that div with the ID content in my CSS, then I want to make sure that all of my article pages are exactly the same. Yes, I could potentially include this in the Article 1 template. But I run the risk of making some sort of mistake where I maybe don't include the ID, maybe I call the ID with a capital C or something like that. So I run the risk of that being slightly different. If I know that for a fact that I want it to be the same on all of them, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of this article template page and put it in the head so that it's absolutely going to be the same. Any other questions so far? Okay. So, right now, if I try to run, if I try to open this article1.php, if I tried to open it in my browser, then I'm going to get something that looks kind of like this. Now, Firefox is being actually kind of forgiving here. Let's see what happens if we do it in Chrome. Yeah, see, that's a bit more natural. And then Edge, Microsoft Edge, let me see. Wow, Edge won't even open at all. That's fine. Yeah. So the thing is, Edge and Chrome actually kind of have it right here. So you see, like where I open this article PHP in Chrome, I'm getting HTML code here. And if I do it in Firefox, Firefox is like, oh, I kind of get what's going on here. But that's not really typical. This is what Chrome is actually doing here, where it's showing the HTML, is technically more correct, because this is not an HTML page. This is .php. What that means is Chrome is not treating it like an HTML page, where naturally we would actually see this H1, naturally we would actually see this H2, and these paragraphs separated out like this. Because it's not an HTML page, Chrome kind of has it right, where it's just simply showing this almost like it's a text file. It's saying, I don't know what to do with this. That's because PHP files are, like I said in the first week, it is a server-side scripting language. What that means is we need to put it on a server somewhere, and that server is going to have the right software in order to actually run PHP files. Now, if you would like to continue to test, websites from your computer without having to upload them all the time, there are programs for Mac. The program most common is called MAMP, M-A-M-P. It's mamp.info. There is a free version, I'm not sure. No, are they pay only now?
No, they have a free version. It's not called Ramp Pro, it's called Ramp.
Yeah. Maybe down something. Anyway, yeah, they last I checked, they definitely have a free version, which will allow you to kind of run kind of a fake server on your computer. However, and the thing is, it's perfectly fine. A lot of developers will just, when it comes to PHP stuff, is they'll just simply use their actual server because that's where it's going to go eventually anyway. So,
And is there one for Windows? Is there one for Windows?
oh yeah, so it's a WAMP, sorry. So, MAMP stands for Mac, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. WAMP stands for Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And there's also LAMP, if you have a Linux machine, that stands for Linux. Yeah. So the thing is, it basically, again, it gives you the AMP part to allow you to kind of do in a fake server on your computer.
May I see your footer PHP then?
Sure. So what this means is at this point, I'm actually going to start uploading it to my server in order for it to, in order for us to see what's actually going on. So, so these are my files here. I have the article 1 PHP, the footer, and the header. I'm going to go ahead and put all of those on my server, and just to ease confusion, I'm actually going to get rid of this article1.html off of my server. And that means that you should be able to view this at this address now. J Davis, ce.com, today's date, / article1.php. If you go to that file, it shouldn't matter if you're in Firefox or whatever, then you should kind of see at least what's in the article 1 by itself. So, if I were to view the source on this, I'm going to go ahead and just do Command U, and if I were to view the source, then this is giving us the actual HTML source that I have in brackets. We're starting with the H1 tag, and then we're ending with a paragraph. So this is viewing the source on article1.php, and we're seeing the exact same thing that we're seeing here in brackets. Now, this isn't what I actually want yet. Yeah, this is what I want. I want this with like the menu here at the top, the footer here at the very bottom, and it doesn't even have any style associated with it because I don't have a style sheet actually in the HTML yet. So, if I'm going to this address, I'm going to article1.php, that means this is the file that we're actually bringing up. I need to tell the browser, or rather the server actually in this case, I need to actually tell the server to include the header.php, I need to include all of this in my article1.php. And I need to include all of this in my article1.php at the bottom. So in order to do that, we're going to write some PHP code in our article1.php. So the very, very beginning of this, we're going to put in left angle bracket, question mark, PHP, and then a couple of lines down, we're going to do a question mark and a right angle bracket. So this is typically how we inject some PHP code in with our HTML. We typically start off with left angle bracket question mark PHP. We write our PHP code here, and then we end with a question mark and an angle bracket. So this could exist all on one line, and often you might also see me do something like this, where it's a question mark and an equal sign instead of the word PHP. But we'll get into that in a minute. But you see that brackets is kind of highlighting our PHP code a little bit differently than the rest of it. But yeah.
Like you mean it's red?
Yeah. So we have.
It's black.
Oh, yeah. I have a different. Sorry, I might have a different theme than you do. But it should be.
I guess my others are blue, so it is.
Okay. Yeah. As long as it's different. Yeah. But yeah, so this is where we can start to inject some PHP code. We have to start off with this, and we have to end with this in order to actually put in what is strictly PHP code. Anything that exists outside of this, it's going to assume is normal HTML. But as soon as the browser, as soon as the server actually sees this, it's going to expect PHP code in here. So the PHP code that we want here is relatively simple. It's just the word include, space, And then we're going to put in the file that we actually want to include inside of quotations. So we have include space, a set of quotations, and then it's going to be the file we want to include in this spot. So what we want to include is header.php. Now, Article 1 in header.php exists in the same directory. What goes on inside these quotations is the exact same thing that you would expect inside of an image tag for SRC. So, for example, maybe I have an includes folder. Like if I had an includes folder, INC folder, then I would put in INC slash header.php. And that assumes that there's an INC folder, and then the header.php is inside of that. So from this file, I have to go into INC, and then find the file. Excuse me. And the same thing if we need to go up one directory, we put in .. to go up or back one directory from this file. But right now we have this inside the same directory, which means that we can kind of keep this simple and just simply have header.php, which is the name of the file we're actually looking for, because they're both in the same directory. So, include header.php takes exactly what is in header.php and puts it exactly in this exact spot right here. So, every bit of code here, it's going to take everything that we see here and put it right here above this H1 for Article 1. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and upload the latest version of our article1.php. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh this live. So, we see that, man, I was trying to be subtle with these colors. Forget these projectors. Anyway, we see that we're getting a bit more of the content here. Like we have the menu here. We have a very subtle gray line you can't see on this projector. We have this blue background here. If I scroll to the bottom, I don't have the footer. Let's go ahead and take a look at the HTML here. Now, if you remember, when I viewed the source on article1.php, the very first thing that we saw was this article1.h inside the h1 tag. So now that I included the header.php, it just copies and pastes everything from that header.php and puts it right above that article1 file. Now, if I scroll to the bottom, we still end with this paragraph tag, because I have not included the footer here yet. So as far as the server is concerned, this is the very end of the file. But again, as far as the server is concerned, I'm copying and pasting everything that I have inside the header.php. I'm copying and pasting it right inside this part for Article 1.
So
You have a question?
I can't test this because I don't have man, right?
Yeah, you should be able to test it. Like I said, if you open up your CyberDuck and start to put it on your on your server, you can do it that way.
Okay, I don't have that set up yet.
Oh, okay.
It's on my other computer. But I'm just
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
still
if you just want to follow along.
Okay.
Actually, does it work from Firefox? No. Okay, yeah. See, if I view the source on Firefox right now, this is, again, trying to pull it from my computer, not from the server. And as far as Firefox is concerned, it's not a server, so that makes sense. I would be very surprised if that actually worked. But anyway. So, by the way, you'll notice that div ID content and article 1, these are both on the same line as far as the source is concerned. Now, 9 times out of 10, no one's going to be looking at your source. It's just dorky web designers like ourselves that are going to be looking at sources of things. So it doesn't really matter that much. However, you'll notice that these are on the same line. That's actually because Our header .php, the very last line is this content here. So it's putting it right here. So this article 1, after this header.php, we have a couple of tabs here, but then it's putting it right here at that point. If I put in a couple of line breaks here, and I save that, and I put that into the header.php, yeah. So I put that into the header.php. You'll notice that it actually does not get to the next line. It still has extra tabs here, but we're not going to get that nitpicky. But again, it's copying and pasting all the code from header into article 1 because I include this include header.php. So let's go ahead and round this out. I'm going to go ahead and take this exact same code. I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom of article 1. I'm going to paste it. So again, the PHP code starts where we have the angle bracket question mark PHP. I'm doing include, and in this case, I'm including footer.php. And this is inside of article 1.php. So let's go ahead and update article 1. So now when I refresh this, I actually get the footer here at the very bottom. And more importantly, when I look at the actual source for this article 1.php, again, right after we have the last paragraph for that last paragraph, we have the code for this footer.php. It includes that exact same thing. So, we have our article 1 PHP, and it includes the header and footer. And really the only PHP code that we've inserted so far is just this include statement, which includes a separate file. Now, this is all really pointless if we only have one article page. Like, there's no real point in separating out into 3 different files with just one article. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take article 1 and I'm going to duplicate this file twice. Yep.
What's the surname in that, right?
It should be yeah, that should be right. Was that the username you were using last time?
Host name.
Yeah, the username should be, just that part.
Okay, sorry.
So I duplicated article 1.php 2 more times. I'm going to name one of them article. I'm going to spell article right. I'm going to name one of them article 2.php and one of them article 3.php. So I duplicated article 1 and I'm calling it article 2 and article 3. But right now the content for all 3 of these is exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and open up article 2. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and open up article 3.
So all you did in article 1 was put header.php and
yeah, so in article 1, all I did was I added in the, we include header.php at the very top, and we're doing the include footer.php at the very bottom in place of that actual code. So article 2 and article 3 should look exactly the same. Just to kind of change this up a little bit, I'm going to take article 2, I'm going to change the title to article number 2. Let's go ahead and change the date to tomorrow. And where we have this image here, we have a background image, which I'll explain in a little bit why we're doing a background image instead of a normal image tag here. but I'm going to change that to Bob 2. So this is Article 2. I changed the title, I changed the date, I changed the image. Let's just keep the rest of the content the same. It's fine. For Article 3.php, let's go ahead and change the title, let's go ahead and change the date, and let's go ahead and change this image. So Article 1 has this content here, Article 2 has this content here, and Article 3 has this content here. But for the most part, Article 1, 2, and 3 are exactly the same. The important part is that we have include header.php and include footer.php at the top and bottom of each one of these. So let's go ahead and upload 2 and 3 to the server. And I do have a menu in here, so why don't we try actually using it. So this is Article 1, it's exactly the same. If I go to Article 2, what? Oh. So one mistake I made in creating this menu is all of these are actually going to HTML files. So if I click on this right now, let's try to go to article2.html. That's a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our header.php, and where I keep saying HTML, that was short-sighted, I'm going to go ahead and change this to .php. Right now we don't actually have an index.php, but we'll get to that in a minute. We have Article 1.php, Article 2.php, and Article 3.php. So I updated this once in the header.php, and because all of them share the exact same header.php, they're all going to share this exact same change that I'm doing here in the menu. So I'm going to go ahead and update that header.php. And now I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, and now all of these should now be going to PHP files. So yeah, if I click on Article 2, what we see as far as the title, the date change, the photo change. Article 3, title, date, and photo change. So we have Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. So Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 are represented by these 3 files here, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3.php. They all share this footer and they all share this header, which means that any changes I make inside this header would be reflected on all 3 pages at the same exact time. So if I capitalize logo here, for example, and I update our header.php, if I go to refresh this, on all 3 pages, logo is now capitalized because I changed it once in the one file. This kind of works just like having a CSS which is being shared by all of your HTML pages. When you have the same CSS file that's shared by all of your HTML files, any changes you make to the general template, like changing the background color or changing something about the typeface, will be reflected on all the pages that have that same CSS file. This is the same kind of thing, only it's with HTML content. So any changes I make to this header.php or any changes I make to the footer will be reflected on all the article pages that share this include. So we have this include header.php and this include footer.php. Does that make sense? So when we get into WordPress, one of the things that we're going to see in the templates that we're going to, the themes that we're going to be dealing with, is that we're going to have a separate file for our header, we're going to have a separate file for our footer, and we can be confident that any changes we make inside those header or footer pages are going to be reflected throughout our entire website. But there's also another change that we're going to have when we start to do our WordPress theme, is if all 3 of these pages look pretty much the same, you know, we have a title, we have a date, and we have content, we have a photo. If they all look pretty much the same except for the actual content changing, then instead of 3 different article pages, we're only going to have 1. And that's what we're going to do next. But Jess, you had a question?
Can you just go to the article on PHP?
Yes. So, like I said, in WordPress and a lot of content management systems, it's great if the fact that we can share this same header, and it's great that we can kind of share the same footer. Now, a big part of why we're sharing the footer, you might say, like, Jonathan, this isn't anything really that special, just like this copyright or thanks for visiting. But really, it's, even if we didn't have that, what's very important in the footer that we're doing for all these is these ending tags. Like, we want to make sure that anything that we start in the header, like for example this content or this wrapper or the body in HTML for instance, we want to make sure that all of that ends within our footer.php. So again, we're able to kind of keep things as consistent as possible, and we know that the wrapping of this whole thing, the start and finish of our HTML pages, are going to be the exact same.
So you like the header?
Yes. I think so. Yeah. There it is.
So right now the home button is
Correct.
There's no.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. We don't have we don't have an index.php right now. We just have header, footer, article. Yeah.
Can you go to the article on PHP and go to the footer? Just want to make sure.
Okay. So, like I said, we really want just one article file. One article file, and all three of these would go to the exact same. We would still have 3 article pages that we can navigate, but ideally we're going to have just one article file. And because the template for all these is the same. We have an H1 tag, we have an H2 tag, we have a div with this featured image, and we have several paragraphs. By the way, while we're here, so we have this div that has a featured image in here. I could have just as easily just done a div. Maybe it has the ID featured image, and just simply done an image tag where the SRC is equal to images and Bob1. So, why did I do a background image instead of doing an image tag? Well, the reason is in my style.css, for featured image, I'm using certain background properties, as far as like the background size cover particularly, so that it will size all the background images into 200 by 200, and it's basically going to fill that area and just crop it as necessary. So I know that no matter what the image actually is, it's going to stay, it's going to be the same exact size, and it's going to fill that area. If you actually take a look at the images, these 3 images are actually 3 different sizes. They're the same orientation, but they're 3 different sizes from what they are. I use a background image, and I use these properties as far as setting up the crop, so that I know for a fact all of them will kind of fill the same area. When you're creating a content management system, again, you're handing this thing off to people that probably don't have Photoshop. Maybe they do. Maybe they do and don't know how to use it. But you have to kind of imagine that people are going to be throwing in images into these areas that you have set up for images that may not be sized or cropped exactly the way you want it. This is why in a lot of places we're going to be using background images in place of actual image tags because it's a lot easier to make sure they're going to be sized and cropped in whatever place you set up for your in your design. But yeah, just in case you were curious about that, but also kind of a little bit of a preview for the future. So, yes. So we want to get to the point where we have just one article page. Okay. So in my files, first, let's go ahead and duplicate article 1 more time. I'm going to copy and paste that file. And I'm just going to call this article. So no number whatsoever. I'm actually also going to close these other files just so I don't get confused, because I get easily confused. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I have just article.php. So, let's go ahead and take out the content that we're actually going to be dealing with here. So the content we have here, we have article 1. Let's go ahead and take that out. So we just end up with the H1 tag. We have the date here. Let's go ahead and take that out and then put the beginning and ending H1 tag and H2 tag on 2 different lines here. For this featured image, well, for the most part, we want to keep this HTML. The thing that we're actually changing is what goes on inside this URL here. So where we have this images/bob1, we're going to take that out for a minute. And then lastly, for the content, we have these paragraphs. I'm actually going to keep the paragraph tags themselves as part of the data, but we're going to take out the paragraphs themselves. Okay. So this is the HTML which is shared by all of our article pages, just without the content itself. So we took out the content, but the HTML that should actually be part of this is the same for all of our article pages. So, so we can do this. Let's do. Yes. So we're going to set up the data separate from this this template. Now there's 2 different places we can do it. We can either do it within this PHP file, or we can do it within the header. Let's. That's going to make more sense. Now this data is actually going to be, now when we actually start to get into WordPress, this data is actually going to be inside of an actual database, so it's not actually going to be part of the HTML file that we actually see here. But just for the example for today, before we get into that, we're going to have to put it somewhere. Let's put it within the same page. So, well, hang on a second. Okay, yeah. Let's put it inside the same page. Okay. So I'm going to create another PHP block here. So this is one PHP block where we can write in some PHP code here. This is another PHP block where we're going to write some PHP code here. To begin with, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a variable. So to create a variable in PHP, we did this a little bit last week with the JavaScript. I'm going to pull that up really quick. Yeah. So in JavaScript, when we need to create a variable, we start off with var, we have the variable name itself, in this case it's n1, is equal to, and we have the value for that. So in this case, we create a variable name called n1, and we set it to this value, but we just need to start off with var so that the browser knows we're starting with a variable. Now, we have var, in this case, is a database, which is an array in this case, that we talked a little bit about last week. In this case, we have var, the thing that we're making up is object, and the value for it is this thing, which is an object. And in this place, we did like actually a multi-dimension array. If you remember, variables can also take the form of just numbers. So we could say like x is equal to 5, or first is equal to 10, or something like that. But we always have var to begin with. We have the variable name that we're making up, and we say equals and whatever the actual value is. In PHP, we set up a variable by starting off with a $, and then we have the variable name, and then we say equals whatever it actually is. In this case, the title is article number 1. So instead of var, we have a $, and we're going to have the variable name that we're making up immediately after that $.
That's the same as jQuery. So jQuery uses $signs for them.
It can. You could use either one with jQuery. You could use the $, or you could also use the var because jQuery is JavaScript. But yes, that's another place you see the same thing.
Is the $, is that something that's sort of like useful across a lot of languages for variables?
In some, it's you never want to make assumptions. Like, so depending on what the language is, like you kind of want to say like, what does the $sign actually mean, like specifically in this one? But yeah, you see it in other languages as well. Yes.
For me, it's like looks like it's a comment.
When you use the $sign?
For the action. Like that looks like.
Oh, you want to start out so before the A for article, and use a quotation. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have title equals article 1. Now again, this works the same way like if we did var x equal to 5. In PHP, it would be $x is equal to 5. So this is the way that we create a variable in JavaScript. This is the way that we create a variable in PHP. And once we set that up, now in JavaScript, if we're doing this in JavaScript, wherever we use that x, it's going to replace it with whatever the variable is. So if we said x, plus 1, that's the exact same thing as saying 5 plus 1. In PHP, it's a little bit different in the sense that we have to actually keep the $sign. So we have $x equals 5. We have to actually continue to use that $sign in order to represent that value. So again, that is the same as 5 plus 1. So again, in JavaScript, we started with var to initialize the variable. We can create whatever variable name we want, and then that replaces it whenever we use that same variable name. In PHP, we have to keep using the $sign for when we start it, but also for wherever we're actually using it. So we have $title is equal to article 1. So where we would actually use that is in between this h1 tag here. So here, between the beginning and ending h1 tag, in order to actually print the value of title, we can do it one of two ways. We can either do question mark PHP, And again, this is where we can start writing PHP code. And we can say echo title. Yeah, just title. So the word echo is basically telling the server to print whatever the value is that's coming after this. So by saying echo title, it's going to print article 1 here. Another way we can do this, which is a bit more common, and it's going to be the way that I'm doing most of the semester. Instead of saying echo, we can instead use this question mark equals. And if we do it this way, then we don't need the word echo. So you'll see that now we only do this if we're replacing echo. We don't do it like up here when we're doing like an include or other kinds of PHP code. This is not something we use for just any PHP code, just as a way of just saving a couple characters. We only do it if we're actually echoing what goes on inside this PHP block. So this works, but this also works, and it's just a little bit shorter. And the reason why some people like this one that's a little bit shorter is if we were to do this all in one line, it's brackets is driving me nuts with these tabs. It's just a little bit cleaner than if we did the exact same thing with the echo command. So I want to be clear. A, B, C, and D do all the exact same thing. So this is one way of doing it, this is one way of doing it, and these two are the exact same thing as above, it's just they're all in one line. So we can either use PHP and echo, or we can use the question mark equals and just simply put in the variable name. And again, the reason why people like this a little bit better is because, especially if you're doing it all in one line, it just is a little bit cleaner, a little bit simpler. But feel free to do it this way if it just helps to make it more clear and helps to understand a little bit better. Like I said, I like to do it this way just because it's, you know, I'm kind of used to it.
So when you use the equal sign, you don't need the semicolon?
Correct, yes. In fact, I don't even know if we need the semicolon here. If we only have one, typically use the semicolon if you're doing a number of different lines. So we might, I don't think we actually need it here at all. But we definitely don't need it if we're doing equals there. So, I'm going to choose only one of these. Like I said, we have 4 different examples doing the exact same thing. I'm just going to choose one of these, which is the only one that we actually need, which is we're setting the title here, and we're actually outputting the title down here. So, just in case you don't believe me, let's go ahead and put that on the server so we can actually take a look at it. So this is article.php without a number. So in other words, I'm going to this one here. And the only thing that exists in here right now, we have the header, we have the footer, and we just simply have the article 1 in the HTML. If we take a look at the view source, it looks exactly like what we have in brackets here. We have H1 and then we have the actual title. We have an empty H2 tag, we have a div that's eventually going to have the featured image, and we're going to have the paragraphs come right after that. But right now, if we take a look at it in the view source, we have an H1 tag, And instead of that PHP code where we have question mark equals title, it is actually replacing that with the value that we have set up here. So we have a variable set up for title, and it's pasting that, printing that out right between this H1 tag here. Does that make sense so far?
I didn't quite get the variables one, but that's on the last week's video, right?
Yeah, we talked about variables from the sense of JavaScript, but this one is, this is just a different, variables are something which is common in a lot of different programming languages. It's just that it looks slightly different from one language to the other. So we won't really be doing the one in JavaScript very much this semester, but this one might be a bit more common. We might be doing a variable in PHP. So it's a good idea to get used to seeing it this way. We have the $sign and a variable name. So the variable name is something that we are making up. The variable name can be a single character, like X or Y. It can also be a complete word. It can even be multiple words. But it cannot have any spaces or special characters in it. So like in this case here, where I have like first paragraph, I couldn't call it first space paragraph or anything like that. And I also can't use any special characters in here, like, I don't know, like ampersand or something like that. It can only be letters or numbers. The underscore is fine. Like that. But when it comes to variable names, you can't even do like a dash like that. See their color difference there. But anyway, so we have $sign variable name equals, and then we have some sort of value. And we set it in one place so we can use it somewhere else. Now again, what we're seeing up here is going to be in a database which is completely separate from our actual HTML and PHP code eventually. But for the example for today, we're going to see it all in the same place, just to kind of get an idea of how this works. So we have title, and this is Article 1. Let's go ahead and let's round this out by doing date equals, and I'm going to pull this from what we actually have in Article 1. So I have date, and it's going to be equal to that date. I'm going to have image. And for the image, I'm just going to take the path to the image, which is actually what's different for each one. I mean, in theory, maybe I could just take the number and just say like Bob, and then the variable name. But I want to be a little bit more flexible in that. So I'm going to use the path to the image, which in this case is images/bob1.jpg. And then lastly, we're going to have the paragraphs. You know what? Okay. For now, I'm just going to keep the paragraphs in there. I just need you guys to trust me. The same thing works with the paragraphs. I just don't want to have like these really long things, but for now, I'm just going to put in the paragraphs manually. So the only thing I'm changing from article to article are these 3 points here anyway. So we just simply have the title, the date, and the image that are changing. So we have a variable set up for the title, we have a variable set up for the date, we have a variable set up for the image. So when we have the H1 tag, this is how we put in that actual value. For the H2 tag, where we have our date, we're going to do the same thing. We put this all in one line. I'm going to do question mark equals $sign date. So in the same way that it pulls the title here, it's pulling it from this variable up here. We also have the date, and it's pulling it from this date up here. Lastly, for the image is slightly more complicated in the sense that we have a lot of other HTML kind of surrounding it. But in the same way, we're going to use this PHP that I have highlighted here. We're going to use this PHP code in place where I would normally have the path. So I'm going to use this PHP code to print out a variable where I would normally, literally, explicitly put in this path. So why don't we just copy and paste it? So we're going to copy this and put it in between these quotations here. But instead of date, I'm going to call it $image. So we have our somewhat database so far up here, where we have 3 different variables which are holding the values for the article. We have the title of the article, we have the date of the article, and we have the image of the article. Here, down here, we have our HTML template. And instead of literally or explicitly writing out article 1, we're putting in the variable for that. Instead of literally or explicitly writing out the date, we're putting in the variable for that, and the same thing for the image down here. And ideally, we would do the same thing for the content down here. I just want to keep this relatively short. Does that make sense so far? So we have the variables up here and like where they're actually being implemented down here. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Update our article.php. And again, if I go to the article.php, then we're seeing all that content actually put in there. If I go ahead and view the source, again, this is that exact same file that we have here. So this is the source of this particular file, and it's replacing wherever we have PHP code. Anywhere where we have this question mark PHP, or anywhere where we have this question mark equals, that's PHP code that's going to be replacing with something else. So here where we have PHP code where it is pulling in the variable, it's replacing that with the value. Same thing for the date here. It's pulling in the variable for the date up here. And for the image, we have div featured images, style background image equals URL, and we have the path to that particular image. In our template, what we have inside those single quotations is that variable name. So we're almost there, but this isn't quite practical yet. So again, the first thing we did was we separated out the single article1.php into 3 different files. We had the header, we had the footer, and we had article1. And that helped us to kind of separate out everything that is being shared by the header, everything that's being shared by the footer into all of our article pages. The next thing we did was we created 3 different article pages, article 1, 2, and 3. And within article 1, 2, and 3, we have the include of the header, we have the include of the footer, but everything else is still literally put in. We have the literal header, we have, the title, literal date, literal path to the image for all 3 of these article pages. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this to the point where we only have 1 article file. And this 1 article file will be used to see all 3 of those pages. So the first thing we did was we kind of started to separate out where the content is from, this is the actual literal content up here, and this is our HTML template down here. So the last thing we need to do is change this article PHP file so that it will actually work for all 3 articles and not just this first one. So ideally, we would also have a fourth variable for the paragraphs. If I did that, this file is just going to be kind of long. So I want you guys to just take my word for it. The same kind of thing would work for the paragraphs. And we can have one thing that you should understand is we could have HTML content in here. So for example, where we have this date here, I could put in strong here. Oh, I'm sorry, bold. I often will use bold, strong instead of bold. But I could put in the bold tag here, which means that right here, what I have highlighted right here would be replaced with what I have inside the quotations here, including any HTML. So for any of these values, I can include HTML. And if I had the paragraphs, so if I had a variable called paragraphs equals quote, I could put everything here, including on the line breaks. I could put everything between those quotations. So we have quote, blah, 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 blah. All of these paragraphs, including the actual paragraph tags. And we end the whole thing with a quote. As long as I don't have any quotes inside of here, which even if I did, there's a way to do what's called escaping it so that it doesn't actually mess it up. But as long as I don't have any quotes inside of here, it's going to take everything within the quotations from start to finish, and it's going to put that into this variable paragraphs, which means that just like everything else, right after this featured image, I can go ahead and put in angle bracket question mark equals paragraphs. And it will replace exactly what I have highlighted here with everything that's within the quotations here. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, like I said, I'm just not doing that right now, just so that we our database here is not going to be too long. Okay. So, this is looking for a variable called title. This is looking for a variable called date. This is looking for a variable called image. We have the variables set up here, but we actually need those to be dynamic, depending on which page we're actually on. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce another bit of PHP code. And we're going to start off with a variable, and we're going to call this article number. And for now, we're going to set article number to 1. Okay. If article number is 1, then this is the data that we actually want. If article number is 2, then this will be the data that we actually want. We want title for to be article 2. We want the date to be tomorrow. We want the image to be Bob 2. And if article number is equal to 3, then this will be the data that we actually want. We want the title to be article number 3. We want the date to be 2 days from now. We want Bob to be 3. So, we're going to have this article number up here, and that's going to change. But depending on what that article number actually is, then this is going to be the data we want, or this is going to be the data that we want, or this is going to be the data that we want. So as long as we keep using, as far as title, here, here, and here, then down here, it doesn't care what's happening up here. It's basically going to pull whatever title currently is. And same thing with the date. It doesn't care what's happening up here, as long as at some point we decide what the actual date is, or the image is. So we have this variable up here called article number, and depending on what it is, it's going to pull one of these 3 lines. So, in order to do that, we're going to include what are called conditional statements. So conditional statements, more specifically called if or else, is again something which is very common in a lot of programming languages. So we're going to set up a condition so that if article number is equal to 1, then it's pulling this. If article number is equal to 2, it's going to be pulling this, so on and so forth. The way that we do this is with an if statement. So an if statement looks like this. We have if, a set of parentheses, and there's a couple of different ways of doing this. Very often you'll see a format that looks like this. We have if, parentheses, we're going to have some sort of condition inside this parentheses, and then we're going to have a left and right curly brace. And this format will work in PHP. However, another format that will also work in PHP, which I use a bit more often, is where we have if, condition, and I'm using the word condition as a placeholder right now, where I'm going to actually replace that in a minute. And we have end if. So these two will do the exact same thing, but I typically use the second one because it's a bit more clear. But yeah. So this condition is asking a question. That question is, the answer to that question is either going to be yes or no, or it's going to be true or false. So that condition, we don't ask a question like, what is the value of X? Or we don't ask a question as far as like, what is title? What we're asking is X equal to 2? Or we're saying, is Y less than 3? Is X greater than 4? All of these questions will be yes or no. So when we normally have this condition here, again, a question that we could ask is X equal to 2? Is Y greater or less than 3? And if we're doing PHP, then we would have the $sign in there. But this is an example of a condition, which is a yes or no question, because Y could potentially be less than 3, or it's greater than 3, or it's equal to 3. But what goes inside these quotations, again, is some sort of question where the answer is either yes or no. So, in this case, the question we want to ask is the value of article number. So, we don't put in if article number, because that is not a yes or no question. That's asking kind of what is article number. But we're instead going to say if article number is equal to 1. However, if we're asking a question, if article number is equal to 1, then we actually put in a double equals. So where we have a single equals, that is setting a value. This isn't asking a question, it's telling you that title is equal to article 1. This is telling you that title is equal to article 2. This is telling you that article number is equal to 1. If we have a double equals, well then that's asking a question. It's saying, is article number equal to 1? If we're doing less than or greater than, we could just simply put in that less than or greater than angle brackets. We don't need to put a double there. But when we're saying equals, if we're asking a question if one thing is equal to the other, then we put in a double equals. So this is saying if article is equal to 1, then it's going to do everything that's in between this beginning statement and this ending statement. So with an HTML, we have a beginning H1 tag and an ending H1 tag, or we have a beginning div and we have an ending div, or a beginning paragraph tag and an ending paragraph tag. And everything that's involved in that goes within those beginning and ending tags. When it comes to CSS, we have a beginning curly brace and an ending curly brace, and everything that has to do with the body goes inside those curly braces. This is everything that has to do with the wrapper goes inside those curly braces. With PHP, when we have this if statement here, we have if and we have end if. And everything that has to do with this if statement, or basically if this is actually true, it's going to do everything that's between this regular colon and this end if. Now, like I said, this exact same thing will work if we also do curly braces. If we end with a curly brace, we don't need the actual semicolon there. These two will do the exact same thing. I often like to have end if because sometimes these if statements can get kind of complicated where there's a lot of things going on between the beginning and end of this. So having the end if sometimes makes it a little more clear. But yeah, we can use either one. So anything that's between this beginning statement and the ending statement will happen if article is equal to 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put these 3 lines where we set the title, date, and image. Inside of this if statement. So if article number is equal to 1, then what's going to happen is it's going to set this to title, it's going to set this to date, and it's going to set this to image. I know I haven't refreshed in a while, but we're getting there in just a minute. So then we're going to say if article number is equal to, we're going to do this exact same format down here. If article number is equal to 2, then it's going to do these 3 statements. Now these tabs don't really matter, but of course the tabs do help us to see what's going on a little bit easier. Also, these line breaks don't particularly matter that much, but it helps to space it out a little bit more so it's easier to read. So if article number is equal to 2, then title is equal to article 2, date is equal to that, image is equal to Bob 2. And lastly, if article number is equal to 3, then we have these 3 lines here. Let's zoom out on this a little bit. I'm going to zoom out on a little bit just so you can kind of see the whole thing all at once. But yeah, we have article number is equal to 1. It's referencing that and saying, hey, if article number is equal to 1, then this is the title, date, and image. If article number is equal to 2, then this is the title, date, and image. And if article number is equal to 3, this is the title, date, and image. So before we move forward, let's go ahead and save. I'm going to upload this to my server. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh. So we'll see that nothing has changed whatsoever. It's exciting, right? Nothing has changed whatsoever. If I view the source, nothing has really changed. We still have article 1 in here, we still have the date in here, we still have Bob 1 in here. Whether we're looking at the actual thing or we're looking at the code, this is the stuff for article 1. I'm going to go into my code, and in just one place right here where we have article number, I'm going to change that from a 1 to a 2. I'm going to save that, upload it, and refresh. I'm going to do this from the view source. If I hit refresh at this point, we see this is now article 2. This is the new date, and this is Bob 2. I'll go back to my code. Change this from article 2 to article 3. This is the only thing I'm changing right here, this number. update and refresh. And it's pulling in Article 3, the 11th, and Bob 3. And if I take a look at this again, we're seeing Article 3, the 11th, and the 3rd Bob here. So, this is grabbing the current article number, which right now we're just setting very specifically here. And then based on that, if it's Article 1, then we're pulling this data. If it's Article 2, then we're pulling this data. If it's Article 3, then we're pulling this data. Now, depending on what literal data we have here, this is the literal data Article 1, this is the 9th, this is Bob 1. This is the literal data here, the Article 2, the 10th, the Bob 2. It's going to take that literal data and put it into this template. This is nothing more than a template here, where it's saying what is the title, what is the date, what is the image. And depending on what that title is, we wrap it inside of HTML. Depending on what the date is, we're wrapping that in HTML. The image, we're wrapping that in some HTML as well. So when we get into our WordPress, you're going to end up with something that looks kind of like this, where we have some HTML that you create. This part here, where we have the H1, the H2, this div, and like the IDs and how these are paragraphs, things like that. All of this is the stuff that you're creating this week as far as just the actual placeholders for the eventual titles, dates, images, things like that. Then you're going to replace that literal content, the literal date and title and images. You're going to replace that with variables. Now, what you're not going to see in your WordPress template is this stuff up here. Because this stuff up here is going to be stored in an actual database. And that's part of what WordPress does for us. Is that we don't see like a huge file here with a bunch of information, a lot of information. This all up here is going to be stored within a database, separate from this file. But your starter template eventually is going to have this kind of thing here.
So does it do that for us? Or we just don't see it?
You don't see it. So when you have a WordPress template, when we get to that point, and we're going to start with that next week. When you have a WordPress template, your article or page file is going to look something kind of like this, like where it's going to have a lot of replacements of variables for literal text. The actual data, like where the data here is what I'm calling Article 2 and this date and this image, all of this data is going to be stored in a database, which is going to be separate. This is the thing that I talked about the very first week. Yeah, the very first week, how it's in a MySQL database. You shouldn't ever have to need to open up the MySQL database. Once you actually set it up, you shouldn't actually need to open it up because WordPress is where you would actually change the title and the date and the images. So you'd actually be logging into the dashboard and making these changes. When you make the changes to the dashboard, it saves it to the database, and then you have your template file, which pulls that actual information.
So we would start that maybe next week?
Yeah. So we're going to get into this next week about what this might look more literally. But I wanted to show you some of the basic PHP code because we're going to be reusing some of these concepts once we actually get to that. So there's one last thing that I want to do to this file before we call it a day, at least on this file. One last thing I want to do is right now I'm literally putting in the article number. So in order to see Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 here, I need to actually change the file and re-upload it and refresh it. Now, in your WordPress, what's going to happen is you're not going to end up with URLs that look something like this. You're going to end up with URLs that might look something more similar to this. something like that. So you're not going to have like anything that ends with .php. You're going to end up with what are called clean URLs, which kind of look like this. Now, if this is my WordPress website that had these 3 pages, all 3 of these, would have maybe a very similar template, but they would have different content. So the about, maybe it looks kind of like this, but it would actually have the about title up here. It would have all the content for about. For this one, we're going to have contact. Again, maybe it's the same template, but it would be a contact title with the contact information. Same thing with the home. Now, if this was my WordPress website, all 3 of these URLs would go to the same exact PHP file. So all 3 of these URLs would reference the same PHP file, and it would pull different information from the database from that same PHP file. The same way that we have it here, we have a single template, and depending on the URL, it's going to pull in different information from the database. So the question is, how does it translate this into knowing the fact, to knowing where in the database to pull the actual information? So if this is the URL where we have /about, and this is the URL where we have /contact, it's going to pull information from the database and put it into this same template. So how does it translate from this URL to go to the same file to get different information in the database? Well, when it comes to WordPress, it's actually done within this kind of complicated file that's called the htaccess. The htaccess looks something like this. If I have, I should have an example here somewhere. Oh, of course not. Do I have this installed? Give me a second here. No. Alright. It doesn't matter, because the thing is, you're rarely ever going to have to actually open up the htaccess file. This is one of the reasons why we use WordPress, is that it takes care of some of the hard work for us. So the htaccess is basically how it translates this into sending information to the saved file. But there's another way around this. Now the URLs aren't going to be exactly what we call clean, but it'll at least be able to replicate the effect that I'm talking about here. So I'm going to replace this 3 with some PHP code here. And the PHP code that I'm going to do is, it's going to be $_ request, all in caps, a square bracket, quotation, the word A, or the letter A, in the quotation and square bracket. So I don't think we're actually going to really have to use this semester, but this is some PHP code that enables us to kind of skip as kind of a shortcut to like doing where we have normal clean URLs. This is kind of a shortcut to that without having to deal with an htaccess file. Like I said, there's an htaccess file which is included in every WordPress installation that will do the translation for us. This is another way around using that file, just for demonstration purposes today. Like I said, we probably won't actually have to use this this semester, but I want to just show you kind of what this looks like. So before I put this in, I had to literally put in the article number and save it and re-upload it anytime I want to see a different article. Now that I have that in there, I'm going to go ahead and upload this one last time. Okay. And I'm going to go to my page. So this is once again, I'm going to blah 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 / article.php. But I'm going to do this a little bit different. And after article.php, at the very end of this URL, I'm going to put in question mark a equals 1. And by doing that, it knows that the article number should be 1. If I do a equals 2, then it knows the article number should be 2. And if I do 3, you're not going to believe this, but it's going to think the article number is going to be 3. So, right at the, normally this is all we had to do, but now that we have this request thing in there, we're putting in question mark, a equals 1. That a, where it gets that a from is this here. I could call this whatever I want. I could call it num. And instead of a, I would actually be looking for num here. But basically the code here, the PHP is telling the server that there is a variable in the URL. There's a variable in the URL called whatever is inside these quotations, whether it's a or num or whatever. So I want you to look for that variable, see what it's equal to. So in this case, a is equal to 1, 2, or 3. So see what it's equal to, and you're going to replace this whole thing with whatever that number is. So because I call it a here, it's going to say a equals 1 in the URL, so it's going to take that 1 and replace this whole thing here. So then article number is equal to 1. If I put in the 2, then article number is equal to 2. If I put in 3, article number is equal to 3. This enables us to change a variable inside of our code with just the URL. Now, like I said, we're probably not going to really get into this semester as far as reusing this, but I want to show you how this works with just non-WordPress PHP. However, the concept is still kind of the same. So in WordPress, like I said, we would have about or contact or home, maybe. And within this URL, we have this magical word about, we have this magical word contact, we have this magical word home. And that is somewhere within the WordPress code. It's taking this word about, it's taking this word contact, it's taking this word home, and it's replacing a variable within the template. And it's using that variable to say, oh, you want the about data, or oh, you want the contact data, or oh, you want the home data. And it's going to pull that data from the database, and then it's going to replace the various variables that you have inside your template. So, like I said, WordPress is the one that kind of takes care of so that it doesn't look like these are considered ugly URLs, these are considered clean URLs. So it's going to take care of the fact that we have ugly URLs and make it clean, but somewhere within the WordPress code, maybe somewhere within our template, it's actually going to be using the variable, which is the title of this page, and it's going to use that as a way of deciding where to pull the information from the database. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So we're
kind of.
yeah. So we're kind of moving slowly from kind of conceptual stuff to the more literal stuff that we're going to be getting into. Next week, like I said, we're going to be getting into much more literally how we're actually going to build out these WordPress websites. But I want to kind of introduce some of these things so that as because you're going to see code that looks very similar to this in your actual starter template. So it's not at least the first time you're seeing it. Yeah. So, last thing.
Were you recording?
Yes. Still recording? Yeah. Yeah, it should still be recording. Do I have time to do this? Yeah. And I'm recording it anyway. So, last thing is I wanted to kind of just walk you just very briefly through, should we save this for next week? Maybe we should save it for next week. How about this? We'll do both. So I'll show it today. We'll have the recording of it so you can kind of follow along a little bit. But I'll probably just review it at the beginning of next week as well, just to make sure that everybody's in the same page with this. So I'm going to do a WordPress install for this.
But we shouldn't, maybe we shouldn't do it on our computer.
I mean, feel free to. It's just that if you're having any issues with logging into Media Temple, Jason doesn't have the login yet. But I'll give it to you before we leave today.
I can do it on a different server and I have a link right now.
Okay. So, yeah.
You're installing WordPress, are you also, but you're not, are you just doing WordPress install or?
Yes.
'Cause I'm pretty familiar with that already.
Okay. So the thing is, first things first, just to be absolutely clear, once again, there's WordPress.com and there's WordPress.org. If you go to WordPress.com, this is not the one that we're using in this class. WordPress.com means that WordPress.com is the one that actually hosts your website. So this is very similar to like a Squarespace or a Wix, where they kind of take care of everything for you, but it gives you less options. It's also a little bit pricier because you actually have to pay for the hosting if you don't want ads. So so we're not doing WordPress.com. Instead, we're doing WordPress.org. And I do have a link to WordPress.org on the class website. If you go to WordPress.org, it's saying blah, 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 isn't this thing great? And you can go ahead and click the big blue button, which is in the top right. And another blue button here. And it's going to give you a zip. So when we have that zip, if we opened it up, we get a whole bunch of different files here.
Wait, which one did we get?
Yeah, so from the homepage of WordPress.org, we have this blue button here for Get WordPress. And then it should always be one here. Yeah, so you can pick the big blue button here. Now, if we were to open up that zip actually on our computer, actually in Finder or File Explorer or whatever, we're going to see a whole bunch of different files. And we could potentially just open up FileZilla and upload all the files that way. However, with a lot of hosts, you can do this slightly easier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire zip and I'm going to upload the zip itself. So if you're in your FTP program, I'm going to go ahead and upload this zip as one whole thing.
Because that's faster than just coding. Like I already unzipped it. Should I?
I mean, it's yeah. If you unzipped it, it's fine. But
Drag the whole folder too.
so if you do the whole folder, then it will do kind of one file at a time. This way I'm doing it is I'm actually uploading the zip itself, not the folder.
Okay, I'll just rezip.
All right. So with Media Temple, if you log in, you're going to see something that looks like this. So if you log into your actual Media Temple account through the browser, this is not through CyberDuck or FileZilla. I'm not talking about the FTP login. I'm talking about the login that actually deals with your actual host. And you're going to have to, once you actually set up WordPress, you shouldn't really need to log into any of this for the rest of the semester. But to begin with, in order to set up the WordPress for the first time, you are going to need to log into this. Now, in Media Temple, there actually is the option of doing what they call a one-click install. So a lot of hosts for very popular content management systems like Drupal and Joomla and WordPress, there's a way to kind of do like a very quick install on that. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Feel free to do that on your own. However, I want to show you the way to do it manually, just in case you're dealing with a situation that does not have a one-click install. Media Temple has a one-click install. Some other hosts also have a one-click install, but not all of them. So I want to show you the way to do it without the one-click, just in case, again, you're in a situation where you need to do this one. So I logged into Media Temple. Most hosts will have some kind of file manager. It might not look exactly like this, but it'll be very similar. When you first go into File Manager, it's going to show you the same exact files that are actually that you would see if you logged into it through the FTP. Feel free to use this instead of your FTP if you really want to. You can click on Upload here, and you can pick files from your computer to actually upload files directly into this program. It's an alternative to FTP. One of the great things about the File Manager, though, and this goes with a lot of hosts, is you have the ability to zip and unzip files from this File Manager. So we have this zip that we uploaded. I'm going to go ahead and click the checkbox for that. And we have this option that says extract files. And if I click on that and I say yes, then it unzips it on my server. So the thing is, rather than unzipping it here on my computer and dragging everything over, I mean, with FileZilla and CyberDuck, it makes it relatively simple to drag over an entire folder. The only thing is it takes a little while because there are a lot of files there. 99% of these files we're not going to have to ever touch, but we still need them. So there's like there's folders within files and files within folders that we all need all those files. But this makes it a little bit quicker when we upload the entire zip, and then we can actually extract it here. Now when we extract it, it's going to give us a folder called WordPress. And actually, ideally, we want these files on our root. So we don't want it inside the folder. We want it outside of the folder. So I'm going to go into the WordPress folder. I'm going to select all of these files and folders here. I'm going to click on where it says Move. And it's going to ask me where I actually want to move it. So I'm going to move it into HTTP docs, which is our actual root. So now if I go into HTTP docs, which is the root of our website, I see all of those WordPress files that I would see if I unzip this on my computer. At this point, I can go ahead and get rid of that zip. I can also get rid of that WordPress folder because they're both unnecessary at this point. So I have all these files inside the HTTP docs, which is the root of my website. Right now, without doing anything else, I could potentially go to my domain and sorry. I have an index.html file in here. You might actually have the same thing. You can go ahead and get rid of that. So, right now, if I go to my domain, jdavis.uartsce.com, it's going to start asking me, it's going to create this form here where it's going to start asking me questions to install WordPress. So I can pick the language. I'm going to go with English. And then it's saying, hey, by the way, we're going to start installing WordPress, but you're going to need some information here. You're going to need a database name, you're going to need a database username, you're going to need a database password, you're going to need a database host, and you're going to need a table prefix. So before you actually click on Let's Go, we can find that information. I'm going to click on it anyway. But you're going to see kind of the same thing. It's asking for that information. So let's go back to Media Temple. And again, this is the same kind of thing with most hosts, is that most hosts, in addition to the file manager, it should have some way to add or edit databases. In Media Temple, the way that you do it is through this side panel here where it says databases. So, this box here represents one database that I have already created, but you won't see this box if you haven't created any databases yet. So you're going to click on this button here that says Add Database. So we have a database name. You can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call mine WordPress 1. I'm going to save this in a text file. So this is my database name, WordPress 1. Then it's going to ask you for a database username. So I'm going to, again, you can say whatever you want. But save that information somewhere. Lastly, it's going to ask for a password. I would have a complicated password. You're not going to have to remember this. You're only going to have to put it in once, and then you can kind of just set it and forget it. So I would highly recommend a complicated password. And if you click on Generate from here, then it will generate a complicated password for you. You can kind of show and hide it with this button here. So this is my password. And again, I have this in a separate notepad file. This is my database name. This is my username. This is my password. Again, you can make up your own password, but again, I highly recommend something complicated. You can also hit Generate here, just as long as you save it somewhere for this installation process.
But we can do this next class, right?
Yeah, I'll go through it one more time at the beginning of next class as well.
Because I log into the Media Temple, but I don't really know.
Okay. So yeah, I have these three pieces of information: the database name, the username, and the password. I'm going to click OK, and it lets me know that database is created. Now, I notice that Media Temple does this automatically. However, some hosts, you have to look into the permissions on the user. Now, again, you don't have to do this for Media Temple, but there are going to be some hosts out there where if there's something wrong with your WordPress database, it says something about the username not having permissions. Within your host, there should be a way of setting the permissions of the user on the database. And with Media Temple, I go to click on the name of the user, and I get a whole bunch of checkboxes here. All these checkboxes are already checked. I don't have to do this for Media Temple. HostGator, which is one of my favorite hosts, I do have to do this for. So with HostGator, I have to actually open this up, and I have to click on a whole bunch of different checkboxes to make sure I set all the permissions. So these are database permissions, basically saying what can this user do on this database. And you want to make sure that everything is selected. So again, Media Temple does this for you automatically. You don't have to worry about it, but I'm just letting you know there are hosts out there that you would have to set up those permissions manually. Okay. So let's go back to where we were installing WordPress. I'm going to take those 3 pieces of information I saved in a separate text file. I'm going to take that database name and then put it where it says database name. I'm going to take the username and set it where it says username. And I'm going to take the password and set it to where it says password. This localhost and table prefix, you can just keep the same as it is. There's some hosts out there that you have to put in something different in these cases, but most hosts, you can kind of keep this the same. Localhost, WP underscore, those are both fine. It's mostly those 3 pieces of information that you need. The database name, the username, and the password. So once I click submit, it's going to say, all right, Sparky, and then we click the run the installation button. And that's it. WordPress is now, well, almost done. So WordPress is now installed on my system. So at this point, I can go ahead and create a site title. I can call this whatever I want. This isn't that, sorry. See. This is a title that we can very easily change later on. The username, call it admin. Actually, no, don't call it admin. Do something else. I'm going to say the username is Jonathan. This password, it's going to give you a now this is a password that you do have to remember. So, I highly recommend a complicated password that you just write down somewhere else. If you want to put in something that you can remember, that's fine, but you really want to go with something that's strong. So, not like password or anything like that. A common rule of thumb when it comes to passwords is that longer is better than more complicated. So if you have something like this, then, I mean, yeah, it's kind of complicated, but it's still kind of weak. What's a better password is a series of words, like the quick brown fox. So even though that's simple, it's just all letters, it's long. Long is better than complicated. So sometimes people will create, like, a series of words that we'll remember, rather than a bunch of weird symbols and things like that.
Exactly.
It's so when it comes to hackers, there's a lot of different ways that people will try to hack into a website. But one is called the brute force. Brute force basically means that there's a program that runs on my computer that's trying to get into your website. And basically it just runs through every single password imaginable. So it's going to start off with 0. It's going to say 1. It's going to say 2. And once it gets all the way from 0 to 9, it's going to say A. It's going to say B. It's going to say C. All the way up to Z. Then it's going to say 0, 0. Then 0, 1. And 0, 2. So it's basically going through every single password imaginable, starting with 1 digit all the way up to however many digits. Now, it might not seem like it's that big of a deal, but it's the longer your password is, the harder that process is. Because it's starting off with just like, one single digit, then it has to kind of run through a whole lot of different letters and numbers in order to get to something more complicated. With every character that you include, it's exponentially more complicated. So by a difference between a 14-character password and a 15-character password is the difference between my program hacking your website in a couple of days versus a couple of months. So the thing is, like, that program that tries to run through every single password imaginable, again, 1 character difference can mean a huge difference with like how it actually happens in your program. We're going to talk about several different security things that are involved with WordPress, but the password is kind of the first line of defense kind of thing. So I would highly recommend a strong password, whatever that means for you. But again, longer is better than short and complicated. Now, if you also, again, want to add in like a number or a symbol, then that's also great. But like I said, longer is better than more complicated. So again, this is a password you definitely want to remember, along with the username, because this is how you're actually logging into your website. If you ever forget your password, then you can reset it by sending a forgot password message to the email that you enter in here. So this email, even if like you're not quite sure what the username is or the password like that, this email is exceptionally important because this is how you can reset the password in case you lose it. If for whatever reason you accidentally put in the wrong email address or you forget what email address you put in here, there is still a way to kind of get into your account. It's just a little more complicated. But anyway, very important you put in the right email address in here. Lastly, this last checkbox, it says discourage search engines from indexing this website. So what that means is on a normal website, like if you're actually creating something for a client, you do not want to check this box because you want that website to show up in search engines. However, for something like this class, or just anything you just don't want to show up on, search engines, then feel free to check that box. When I was creating client websites, we very often would create websites in a beta environment, in which case I would check this because if I'm creating a website for Nike, for example, I don't want my Nike beta website to show up in search engines. So I would check this for the beta website so that it would not show up in addition, if I'm redesigning the Nike.com website. I never designed the Nike.com, I just use that as an example. I would have a lot more money, I would say, if I was working for Nike. But it's kind of up to you. It's completely up to you if you want to check that or not. But like I said, if you're dealing with production, if you're dealing with live websites, or something that is going to go up pretty immediately, then yeah, you don't want that checked. So lastly, you click that install, and then you can say login. It's going to give you your login page, which you can put in your username and password that you just set up. And then you get your dashboard. And this is what I see as an admin, and this is what everyone else sees right now if they go to my website, is they see the introduction the introduction WordPress template along with some really basic content. So, like I said, we'll review that one more time beginning of class next Tuesday. However, I would like you to at least try it on your own. So you can follow the recording, which I'm going to end right now.